Something feels different about 2026, doesn't it? AI is writing code, software is automating entire industries, and tools that once required full teams are now available to anyone with a laptop. And it feels like a massive wave forming in the tech world. Catch it at the right moment, and it can launch you forward, but starting a company is not glamorous. Even Sam Altman warns that you should never start a startup just for the sake of it. There are easier ways to make money. And the only real reason is if you're driven to solve a problem you just cannot ignore. Dustin Moskovitz puts it even more bluntly. Building a company is like running a marathon where the course just keeps on changing. It's hard, it's stressful, and it often takes years. So why start now? Because AI is lowering the barrier to building things, and a single person today can create products that once required an entire team. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through a practical roadmap for starting a startup in 2026. From finding the right idea to building your MVP and reaching product market fit. And later in this video, I'm going to walk you through a practical roadmap for starting a startup in 2026, from finding the right idea to building your MVP and reaching product market fit. And later in the video, I'm also going to show you how to build anything with the best AI building tool at this moment, Base 44. I added a special link in the description below so you can go ahead and check them out too. Now, if you want to master Base 44 and learn how to build a profitable SaaS website and mobile app with AI, I've created a complete masterclass that shows you exactly how to do it step by step. And usually this costs $299, but for the people watching this video, you can go ahead and join completely free. Again, check that link in the description to get free access to my Base 44 masterclass and start building your very own AI-powered business today. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. The first step in building a startup does not start with code, funding, or even a business plan. It just starts with the idea behind the company. And this is where a lot of people get confused. You've probably heard the phrase, ideas don't matter, execution is everything. And while execution is incredibly important, Sam Altman argues that this thinking has gone a little bit too far. In reality, bad ideas usually stay bad, no matter how well you execute them. And most great companies start with a genuinely strong idea, not a random pivot or a trend. So instead of asking, which startup should I build? A better question is, what problem can I not stop thinking about? So ask yourself a couple of honest questions. First, do you feel compelled by the problem that you're trying to solve? Altman explains that passion should come before the startup itself. And when things inevitably get difficult, and they will, you'll need a mission that keeps pulling you and pushing you forward. Second, would you still want to work on this idea even if the money came slowly? Founders who are mission-driven tend to stick around even when the road gets tough, and while those chasing status or quick success usually just burn out. So if you can't confidently answer yes to those questions, it might be a sign that you got to keep on searching. Now, instead of chasing the biggest or trendiest markets, why not look for small markets that are growing quickly? Peter Thiel famously points out that many successful companies start by dominating a tiny niche before expanding outward. In fact, many great ideas initially look small or even uninteresting from the outside. Another powerful place to look is your own daily frustrations. Some of the most successful startups started as personal problems. Airbnb, for example, began when Brian Chesky needed a way to pay rent and decided to, rent out his space in his apartment. And problems you personally experience often do reveal opportunities others are facing too. So you should also think about the why now factor. Ask yourself what has changed recently that makes this idea possible today, but difficult a few years ago. And new technologies like AI, regulatory shifts, or changes in consumer behavior can suddenly open doors that were previously closed. But at the same time here, do be cautious about building something that's simply a copy of an existing product. Ideas that search for problems rarely succeed, and if you find yourself focusing more on impressing investors than actually helping customers, it may be time to step back and then reassess. Because choosing a startup idea is not like choosing a side project. You're potentially choosing a mission that could shape the next decade of your life. So look for the problem that feels impossible to ignore, the itch you just can't help but scratch. And when you find that, you've taken the first and most important step toward building a startup that truly matters. Once you have an idea that feels compelling, the next step is making sure there's actually a market for it. Because even the best product won't succeed if nobody needs it. Think of it like opening a lemonade stand in a ghost town. It doesn't matter how refreshing the lemonade actually is if there is no one around to buy it. Sam Altman often points out that many investors make that mistake of focusing too much on the current size of a market. but what really matters is how fast that market is growing. A small market that is expanding quickly can be far more valuable than a huge market that's already kind of just stagnant. In fast-growing markets, customers are actively looking for solutions. They're often willing to tolerate rough edges or early imperfections because they genuinely need what you're building. Another question to ask here is whether your market will still exist in the future. Altman suggests thinking carefully about what the market might look like 10 years from now. If the industry that you're entering isn't growing or evolving, it may be difficult to build something that actually lasts. And one helpful way to think about this is by looking for tailwinds. So technologies like AI, the rise of remote work, or developments in climate tech are powerful trends that can push entire industries forward. So when you build in a space with strong tailwinds, the momentum of the market helps carry your product. Now, let's look at a simple way to validate your idea before you actually start building anything. Now, the first step is to talk to real people. Try to speak with at least 10 potential customers who might experience the problem you're trying to solve. Ask them about their current frustrations and how they deal with them today. Honest conversations like these often reveal whether the problem is truly important or just an assumption. Next, you can test demand with a simple landing page. Create a basic one-page website that describes the problem and your proposed solution. Then invite people to sign up for updates or early access. If no one signs up, then that feedback is valuable. It just may mean that the idea needs adjustment. Another thing to look for is desperate early adopters. In similar but rapidly growing markets, there are often people who are actively searching for solutions. And these early users are incredibly valuable because they are more forgiving of early flaws and are usually willing to give detailed feedback. It's also helpful to revisit the important question: why now? What has changed recently that makes this startup possible today but difficult a few years ago? And what might happen in the next few years that could make it too late to start? And if you don't have a clear answer, the timing of the idea may not be right yet. Finally, try to stay close to the problem itself. If you're building something for a specific group of people, then spend time with them, talk to them regularly, understand their daily workflow and their frustrations. The closer you are to your users, the more insight you'll gain, and that insight can save you months of building the wrong thing. So validating your market may not feel as exciting as building a product, but it is one of the most important steps in the startup journey. Because once you know that the problem truly does matter to people, then everything you build afterward has a much stronger foundation. At this stage, a lot of founders feel the urge to finally start building everything they imagined. The idea feels real, people showed interest, and now it's tempting to turn the product into a full vision right away. But this is exactly where many startups go wrong. They try to build too much, and when you're excited about an idea, it is tempting to add every single feature that you can think of. But the goal of an MVP isn't to build a full product, it's to test your core idea as quickly as possible. Sam Altman often reminds founders that many of the most successful companies started with surprisingly simple versions of their products. Early Facebook was basically just a list of student profiles. Google started as a plain page with a search box. Even the first iPhone launched with only a handful of core features. And that simplicity forced those teams to focus on doing one thing extremely well. Another important principle here is focusing on love, not likes. It's far better to build something that a small group of people absolutely loves than something that a large group of people just only kind of like. Altman explains that it is much easier to grow from passionate users to a larger audience than it is to turn lukewarm interest into genuine enthusiasm. Products people love naturally generate word of mouth. Products people merely tolerate usually don't. So when launching your MVP, your first goal isn't thousands of users, it's your first 10. And then you should find them manually without ads or large marketing campaigns. Now, this part isn't glamorous. It often means sending direct messages, reaching out personally, or talking to people one by one. Altman also shares a famous story about Pinterest's founder, Ben Silbermann. In the early days, he would walk into coffee shops and ask strangers to try the product on their phones. He even changed the homepage on display computers at Apple stores so visitors would land directly on Pinterest. It was awkward, but it worked, and this is what startup founders often call doing things that don't scale. As people begin using your MVP, it's important to build tight feedback loops. Talk to your users frequently and pay close attention to what they say. Ask what they like, what frustrates them, and what would make them recommend the product to someone else. And the key is to turn that feedback into quick improvements. If your product improves even just by a little each week, say 10%, that progress compounds over time. A few principles help keep this process effective. Keep your feedback loop short. Ideally, you should measure improvements in hours or days, not months. Don't hide behind sales teams or support agents in the early stage. And as a founder, you should be the one talking directly to your users. And those conversations reveal insights that no report or dashboard can replace. And focus on metrics that actually matter, such as active users, retention, and revenue. Vanity numbers like total signups or social media impressions can look impressive, but rarely tell you if people truly value your product. And above all, be obsessive about quality. Great founders care deeply about the experience they're building. If something isn't working well, they fix it quickly. They respond to users directly and continuously improve the product. So instead of building 10 features that work just okay, focus on building one feature so good that your early users would genuinely miss it if it disappeared. And once you achieve that level of value for a small group of people, scaling becomes much easier because now the foundation is already strong. After validating your idea and defining your MVP, many founders reach a very practical crossroads. You know what you want to build, but the real question becomes, how are you actually going to build it? And for many beginners, this is the moment where things start to feel quite overwhelming, especially if you're not a developer. And for a long time, launching a startup product meant doing things the traditional way. Hiring developers, writing thousands of lines of code, and waiting months before a working version of your product even exists. And the reality is that building an app the old school way can be extremely expensive. Even a relatively simple application often costs between $25,000 and $60,000 and can take 2 to 4 months to develop. More complex products can easily exceed $200,000 and take a year or longer to build. Development agencies typically charge $100 to $300 per hour, and while freelancers might be cheaper, you'll often have to manage the entire development process yourself. Now, imagine spending months building a product only to realize that your idea needs to pivot after early user feedback. That can burn through both your time and your budget very quickly. But the landscape is changing. In 2026, AI-powered development platforms are making it possible to turn ideas into working software a lot faster. Instead of manually building every feature, you can just describe what you want in plain language, and then the platform generates the structure of the application for you. Tools like Base44 can create pages, user flows, and integrations automatically. They also handle things that normally require a lot of back-end development, such as user authentication, data storage, and role-based permissions. So when you are ready to launch, built-in hosting and analytics mean that you can deploy the product with just a few clicks. So now let's go ahead and check this out. In this example, we'll create a simple fitness class scheduler web app in about 10 minutes. So here's the prompt we're going to use to generate the app. Build a simple fitness class scheduler web app where gym owners or trainers can create, edit, and manage weekly fitness classes such as yoga, HIIT, spin, and strength training. The app should allow admins to add classes with details including class name, instructor, date, start time, duration, capacity, and location, while users can view the schedule in a clean calendar or list format and reserve a spot if seats are available. Include basic features like booking confirmation, automatic seat limit tracking, the ability for users to cancel reservations, and an admin dashboard to manage classes and see participant lists. The interface should be mobile-friendly, simple, and fast, with optional notifications or reminders for upcoming classes. And with that prompt, the system generates the initial version of the product. If something isn't quite right, you just simply refine it with additional prompts. So, for example, we can add a login system now with another prompt. Add a user login system where members can create accounts, view their book classes, receive reminders for upcoming sessions, and manage or cancel their reservations from their personal dashboard. After previewing the app on mobile, you can now might notice that the interface needs a little bit of improvement here. Instead of manually redesigning everything, you can just simply send another instruction, like, please ensure that all pages have a mobile-friendly interface. So the key thing to understand here is that your first prompt, it does not need to be perfect. You can continuously improve the application by adding follow-up prompts and small refinements as you go. So in terms of speed and cost, this approach can dramatically change how startups build products. AI development tools can reduce MVP development costs by 70 to 90% and shorten development timelines to 2 to 6 weeks. And that means founders can test ideas much faster and preserve more runway while validating their product. However, there is an important trade-off. No-code and AI development platforms are incredibly powerful for building prototypes and MVPs, but they're not always designed for long-term scaling. Because while more than 70% of new business applications now include low-code or no-code components, fewer than 30% scale without eventually needing significant redevelopment. So as your product grows, you may encounter limitations in performance, customization, or integrations. In addition, relying heavily on a single platform can create vendor lock-in, meaning your product becomes dependent on that ecosystem. And because of this, many founders treat platforms like Base44 as training wheels. They allow you to quickly build a working product, validate your idea, gather user feedback, and iterate rapidly. And once you know the product truly works and people are using it, well, then you can then decide whether to continue improving the platform or rebuilding with a fully custom solution. Choosing your building approach ultimately comes down to your priorities. Do you want speed and rapid experimentation right now, or are you okay with maximum flexibility for long-term scaling? For many early-stage startups, the fastest path is often the smartest one, because the most important thing isn't the technology itself, but proving that people actually want what you're building. And once you do start seeing real usage, the next challenge becomes something every founder eventually faces: achieving product market fit and scaling your startup without breaking it. But here's the thing, because Base44 is incredibly powerful, but most people don't know how to use it properly. They end up building basic apps that don't make money or websites that don't convert. And that's exactly why I created my complete Base44 Masterclass. Inside this course, I'm going to show you step by step how to build profitable SaaS businesses, high converting websites, and of course, mobile apps, all using AI with zero coding required. You're going to learn how to build SaaS apps that solve real problems and generate recurring revenue, the exact prompts and strategies that I use to create professional websites in minutes, how to clone successful apps and then add your own profitable twist, and my proven system for turning Base44 projects into actual income streams. And I want you to know, this is not just theory. I'm going to walk you through real builds. I'm going to show you my exact process, and I'm going to give you the templates and the frameworks that have helped my students launch their very own successful AI-powered businesses. So if you're serious about building something profitable with AI in 2026, click that link in the description to join my Base44 Masterclass. I promise you, your future self will thank you for taking action today instead of just watching another tutorial. So after launching your MVP and getting your first users, the next milestone is product market fit. And this is a stage where you discover whether your product truly solves a problem people care about. So how do you know when you've reached it? When a product finally hits the mark, something starts to shift. Because instead of constantly pushing your product onto people, you now find yourself trying to keep up with the demand. Customers begin recommending it to their friends without being asked. Your retention curve stops dropping sharply and starts to level out. People discover your product through word of mouth rather than through, say, expensive advertising. And sometimes growth even begins to happen in ways you never planned. Instead of struggling to attract new users, you might find yourself busy supporting the ones you already have. According to Sam Altman, the clearest sign of product market fit is organic growth, where people just naturally share the product because they genuinely love using it. At the same time, it is important to recognize signals that can be misleading. Large download numbers or social media likes might look impressive, but they don't necessarily mean people value your product. And these are often called vanity metrics because that's it. They create the illusion of traction without proving that users actually care about the solution. What really matters is whether people continue using the product and recommend it to others. One of the most effective ways to improve your product at this stage is through the build, measure, learn loop. Altman describes this as a simple but powerful cycle. You build a small improvement, measure how users interact with it, learn from their behavior, and then repeat the process. Instead of waiting months to launch large updates, you could just continuously make small changes and then learn from real feedback. Speed is critical in this process. The faster you move through the cycle, the faster you understand what works and what doesn't. Many startup playbooks recommend starting with a very narrow group of users, building the smallest possible solution for them, and paying attention to patterns in their feedback. Each experiment reveals something about what users actually value. So, during the early days, founders also needed to stay extremely close to their customers. In fact, Altman often agrees that founders should personally handle customer support at the very beginning. Speaking directly with users helps you really understand their frustrations and quickly identify areas that need improvement. It also builds stronger relationships with early adopters who are often willing to provide detailed feedback. And as your product grows, focus on metrics that show real engagement and value. Retention reveals whether users keep coming back after weeks or months. Engagement frequency shows how often they interact with the core features of the product. Organic growth reveals how many new users are arriving through referrals from existing customers. Comparing customer acquisition costs with lifetime value helps determine whether your business model can sustain itself. Another useful measure is time to value, which shows how quickly users experience the main benefit of your product after signing up. Altman also emphasizes one of the clearest signals of real demand: revenue. When customers are willing to pay for your product, and especially when they continue paying over time, it strongly suggests that you're solving a meaningful problem. On the other hand, metrics like total signups or social media impressions can make a startup look successful without proving that users actually care about the product. And these numbers may feel encouraging, but they rarely predict long-term success. Ultimately, product market fit is not about popularity or hype. It's about building something that people genuinely need and continue using over time. And once that happens, the focus shifts from proving the idea to figuring out how to scale the product and the company around it. At the beginning of a startup, it might feel like you can handle everything yourself. You're building the product, talking to users, and making decisions quickly. But as the company starts moving forward, it does become clear that the people you bring in will shape what the startup becomes. And the right team can accelerate progress, while the wrong team can slow everything down. Sam Altman warns that choosing the wrong co-founder can lead to serious problems later. In fact, he often says that random co-founders are a recipe for disaster. Most successful startups are built by 2 or 3 founders, and investors rarely fund companies run entirely by one person. A strong co-founder should be someone who is relentlessly resourceful, someone who can push through obstacles and keep the company moving forward when things just get difficult. It's also important that you know your co-founders well before starting a company together. Building a startup is a long and demanding journey, so trust and shared experience matter. And if you're not technical, Altman suggests finding a technical partner who can then help build the product. In many cases, 2 or 3 founders provide the right balance of skills and decision-making. Too many founders can create confusion, while building alone can be extremely risky. There's also the question of whether co-founders can work remotely. Altman notes that at the very early stage, this is rarely effective. Early startups require constant communication and collaboration, and working closely together helps build trust and momentum. Another important decision is when to start hiring employees. And many founders feel pressure to hire quickly, but Altman actually recommends the opposite approach. In the beginning, it's usually best to keep the team very small until the workload becomes just so overwhelming. Airbnb is a good example. The founders spent 5 months searching for their first hire and only added 2 employees during the entire first year. So, taking time to hire carefully helped them protect their culture and ensure that every early hire truly mattered. Startup guides also suggest that early teams should cover a few key areas of expertise, and these include deep knowledge of the problem that you're solving, startup business development, marketing and sales, and technical execution. In early-stage companies, founders often wear multiple hats, and that's perfectly normal. What matters most is that those core capabilities exist somewhere within the team. Your first hire should also strongly believe in the company's mission. Early employees shape the culture and direction of the startup, so commitment is just as important as skill. Altman often warns that mediocre hires can damage a company's culture, which is why many founders follow the principle of hiring slowly, but acting quickly if the fit isn't right. Another critical topic here is how ownership of the company is divided. So equity splits should be discussed early and handled transparently to avoid conflict later. And one common mistake that founders make is failing to set up proper vesting schedules. Experts often recommend near equal equity splits among founders combined with 4-year vesting schedules and a 1-year cliff. So this structure ensures that if someone does leave early, they don't walk away with a large portion of the company without contributing long-term value. So equity also plays a role when hiring employees. Offering stock options helps align incentives and encourages employees to think like owners rather than just workers. And many startups create an early employee option pool of around 12 to 15%, which typically becomes about 10% after Series A funding. And this system helps attract talented people who do want to share in the company's long-term success. Finally, remember that company culture begins from the very first hire. Every person who joins the team influences how the company operates and how decisions are made. Altman emphasizes that early team members must deeply believe in the mission of the company. A shared vision helps keep everyone aligned, especially when the startup faces challenges. Successful startups often have 2 to 3 founders who balance skills and vision, creating a strong foundation for the company. Founders also set the tone through their own behavior. Clear communication, consistency, and resilience help attract talented people who want to work towards the same goal. Building a culture of ownership and accountability early on is a lot easier than trying to fix a broken culture later. In many ways, building your team and finding product market fit go hand in hand. The right people help you discover what truly works, and once your product gains traction, it becomes easier to attract talented individuals who want to help grow the company. So keep your focus on the mission, surround yourself with the right people, and you will be building something worth fighting for. Once your startup begins gaining traction and showing signs of product market fit, the next challenge is growing the company in a sustainable way. Growth isn't just about adding more users, it's about building momentum without breaking what already works. One of the most powerful growth drivers for startups is word of mouth. In a world full of ads, organic recommendations often stand out the most. People naturally trust suggestions from friends and colleagues and communities far more often than traditional advertising. And because of that, encourage happy users to share your product. And this might happen in private chats, niche forums, or through micro-influencers who speak to small but highly engaged audiences. These users often become your strongest advocates. So customers who arrive through referrals also tend to stay longer and spend more than those who come through paid ads. Advertising can create awareness, but trust is what usually drives action. And at some point, many startups consider raising outside funding, but timing matters. Ideally, you want to raise capital from a position of strength, not desperation. Investors respond better when you already have traction and a clear plan for how the money will move the company to the next milestone. Many founders plan for 12 to 18 months of progress with each round. When pitching investors, you should clearly explain how the capital takes the company from its current stage to the next one. Fundraising when cash is already low can lead to poor terms. If you have strong traction or expect to run out of runway within 6 months, it may be time to start conversations, since raising funds often takes 3 to 6 months. On the other hand, if you can't continue growing through customer revenue, delaying fundraising may be the better option. Capital is expensive, and it's most valuable when it truly accelerates growth. And as your startup grows, it's important to build advantages that become harder for others to replicate. Early-stage startups usually have little protection from competitors, which is why successful companies gradually build what investors call defensibility. And one common framework is the Mott and Bailey strategy. First, grow quickly to gain distribution, visibility, and brand momentum. Then, strengthen the business with deeper advantages, such as network effects, proprietary data, and products embedded into users' daily workflows. Strong defensibility today often comes from network effects, valuable data, strong distribution, trusted brands, and products that become part of how people work. And over time, each new user should ideally make the product better or more valuable for everyone else. As growth accelerates, startups also need to prepare for scaling the organization itself. And scaling requires systems, not just ambition. Companies need resources like capital, skilled talent, and reliable technology. Hiring becomes more complex as teams grow, and retaining strong people become just as important as recruiting them. It's also important to invest in infrastructure that can handle increasing demand. Scalable software systems, better internal tools, and clear team structures help keep operations running smoothly as a company expands. And at the same time, founders must keep reinforcing the company's core mission. Communicating that mission clearly helps teams stay aligned as the organization grows. Financial discipline also becomes more important at this stage. Monitoring burn rate, forecasting revenue, and managing cash flow help ensure the company can handle growth without unnecessary risk. In the end, growth isn't just about doing more, it's about doing the right things more intelligently as the company scales. As exciting as building a startup can be, many companies fail because of avoidable mistakes. In many cases, mistakes hurt startups faster than competitors ever could. Understanding these common pitfalls early on can save you time, money, and frustration. And one mistake many founders make is building their product in stealth mode. The idea sounds appealing, keeping everything secret so no one steals it, but really, secrecy often just blocks the most important thing a startup needs: feedback. Entrepreneurs like Adam Robinson point out that building in secret usually does more harm than good. Most people aren't trying to steal your idea, and without feedback from potential users, you risk building something nobody actually wants. Talking to prospects early helps refine the product much faster. Another common mistake is hiring too early. Many founders think adding people will speed things up, but early hiring often creates unnecessary complexity. Sam Altman instead recommends keeping the team small until hiring becomes absolutely necessary. Airbnb, for example, spent 5 months searching for its first employee and then kept the team tiny during the first year. Hiring slowly helps ensure each person truly contributes to the mission. Founders also sometimes ignore unit economics, which determine whether a business can actually make money. Understanding the relationship between customer acquisition cost and the revenue those customers generate is essential for building a sustainable company. And these numbers also matter to investors, so it is important to track them from the beginning. Another trap is competing only on features. Many startups try to win by adding more features or building faster than competitors, but strong companies usually differentiate through a clear identity and value proposition. Instead of presenting a long list of features, focus on the story and transformation that your product delivers. Finally, founders sometimes neglect legal basics while focusing on the product. Skipping early steps like proper company formation, intellectual property protection, or market research can lead to costly problems later on. Incorporating early helps protect liability and build a solid legal foundation, especially if you plan to raise an investment. So avoiding these common mistakes can give your startup a much stronger chance of surviving the early stages and continuing to grow. Starting a company often sounds exciting from the outside, but the reality is so much tougher. Building a startup is less about glamour and more about persistence through long, difficult stretches. The numbers reflect that reality. According to Failery, 9 out of 10 startups fail. Even venture-backed companies aren't immune. About 7.5 out of 10 still fail. Only 2 out of 10 new businesses survive their first year, and just around 1% eventually become unicorns. The personal toll can also be significant. A 2025 survey found that 54% of founders experience burnout. Nearly half rated their mental health as bad or very bad, and 75% reported dealing with anxiety. On top of that, many founders work long hours as well. About 2/3 report working more than 50 hours per week, and 61% say they take fewer holidays. So these numbers aren't meant to discourage you. No, they're meant to prepare you. As Dustin Moskovitz once said, if you start a company, it's going to be extremely hard. Sam Altman adds that the only good reason to start a startup is if you feel deeply compelled to solve a particular problem. So if that pull isn't there yet for you, another path can still be incredibly valuable: joining an early stage startup. You can learn how companies are built, earn equity, and contribute to something meaningful without carrying the full weight of founding it yourself. There's absolutely no shame in choosing that path. Now, the future may feel uncertain, but it's also full of a lot of opportunity. Several major trends are creating new spaces where startups can grow. If you're looking for ideas or markets to explore, these areas are worth paying attention to. AI integration is one of the biggest shifts happening right now. A 2026 Forbes survey found that 93% of executives consider control over AI models and data a major priority. And then, at the same time, employees are increasingly adopting AI tools and building new skills around them. AI also enables real-time modeling and decision-making, allowing businesses to turn uncertainty into opportunity. Another major shift is the rise of remote-first work models. Remote work is not disappearing. About 75% of employees worked remotely at least part of 2025. And many workers report improved work-life balance, and managers often see productivity gains as well. For startups, remote hiring opens access to global talent and can significantly reduce hiring time. Sustainability and climate tech are also rapidly growing areas. Innovations such as AI-powered energy grids, energy storage systems, renewable energy expansion, sustainable transportation, and climate-smart agriculture are gaining attention. So the AI environmental sustainability market alone is projected to reach $49.27 billion by 2030, showing how large the opportunity could become. The creator economy is another expanding space. As word of mouth spreads through micro-influencers and user-generated content, platforms that help creators build communities and monetize their audience are in high demand. Tools that support creators in managing content, memberships, or digital products continue to grow in popularity. Last, but definitely not least, no-code and low-code development platforms are transforming how products are built. Gartner predicts that 70% of new enterprise applications will use low-code or no-code tools by 2026. Some organizations report development times dropping by as much as 90%, making these platforms ideal for rapid prototyping and MVP testing. So the opportunities are out there. It's just simply a matter of recognizing where the trends are heading and then building solutions that take advantage of them. And that brings us to the end of this guide. If there is one thing to remember here, it's this: focus on solving a real problem, validate your idea before building, stay close to your users, and keep your business fundamentals strong. If this video helped you out, please consider sharing it with a friend, leave a comment as well, and subscribe for more practical startup guides. And if you keep thinking about that one problem, the one you just cannot ignore, then maybe it's time to start building it. Thanks for watching and investing your time with me today. I'll see you at the next one.